Quote, Psi is a term from parapsychology derived from the 23rd letter of the Greek alphabet, from the Greek psyche, mind or soul. The term was coined by biologist Berthold P. Weisner and first used by psychologist Robert Thouless in a 1942 article published in the British Journal of Psychology. Definition: a term used to demarcate processes or effects associated with cognitive or physiological activity that fall outside of conventional scientific boundaries. For example, extrasensory perception. Traditionally, the term has had two subcategories: psi gamma, pertaining to paranormal cognition, ESP, remote viewing, etc., and psi kappa, pertaining to paranormal action, psychokinesis, etc. End quote. The great question involved in psi research is whether precognitively knowing something will happen is tantamount to having actively participated in causing it to have occurred. For example, the difference between knowing a traffic light is changed while not looking at it and having caused the traffic light to change by thinking about it. Thus, the distinction between psi gamma, remote viewing, and psi kappa, remote influencing, should not be taken lightly. Quote, remote viewing, RV, refers to the attempt to gather information about a distant or unseen target using paranormal means or extrasensory perception. Typically, a remote viewer is expected to give information about an object that is hidden from physical view and separated at some distance. The term was introduced by parapsychologists Russell Targ and Harold Puthoff in 1974. Remote viewing was popularized in the 1990s following the declassification of documents related to the Stargate project, a $20 million research program sponsored by the U.S. federal government to determine any potential military application of psychic phenomenon. The program was terminated in 1995, citing a lack of documented evidence that the program had any value to the intelligence community. End quote. Why would the U.S. DoD, the American military-industrial complex, consider RV a viable enough resource to invest $20 million throughout the G.H.W. Bush administration? Could it be because of the Reagan debriefing on Project Serpo, which would have come as no surprise to his successor, G.H.W. Bush, who had denied Reagan's predecessor, Jimmy Carter, access to the same information as head of the CIA under Carter? Quote, the Stargate project created a set of protocols designed to make researching clairvoyance and out-of-body experiences more scientific and minimize as much as possible session noise and inaccuracy. The term remote viewing emerged as shorthand to describe this more structured approach to clairvoyance. Stargate only received a mission after all other intelligence attempts, methods, or approaches had already been exhausted. At its peak, Stargate had as many as 14 labs researching remote viewing. It was also reported that there were over 22 active military and domestic remote viewers providing data. In 1995, the project was transferred to the CIA, and a retrospective evaluation of the results was done. Time magazine stated in 1995, 3 full-time psychics were still working on a $500,000 a year budget out of Fort Meade, Maryland, which would soon close up shop. One was using tarot cards. End quote. Bear in mind, the termination of the Stargate project came 1 year following the beginning of Clinton's second term as G.H.W. Bush's successor as U.S. President, and 2 years following the primary crisis of his first term, the ATF and FBI siege on the Branch Davidian compound in Waco, Texas. From what I've read by authors who had been involved with Project Stargate, they often mention their more controversial and more theoretical on-target hits, such as US CIA collusion in the ignition of the oil reserves in Saudi Arabia, and the contamination of these fires with chemical, biological weapons, which resulted in Gulf War syndrome among the veterans. However, statistically, the data supports that their hit-to-miss ratio as a group was only on target about 20% of the time. In the work, Remote Viewing Secrets, by Joseph McMoneagle, one of the original members of Project Stargate, brought on board by its originally commissioned founder, Ingo Swann, has compiled his own research on potential causes for the apparent discrepancy between the accuracy of their 20% on-target hits and their general apparent inability to accurately target about 80% of the time. He correlates the effects on their hit-to-miss ratio with the Earth's sidereal day, that is, the exact duration of a complete rotation of Earth on its axis, and their own location on the globe relative to the direction from Earth of galactic core. He found a strong positive correlation between the rising and noon of the sidereal day relative to galactic core with the accuracy of the Stargate project team's hits, and between the waning and midnight positions of galactic core relative to their position on Earth with the inaccuracy of the team's misses. However, while addressing the legitimate and most recently declassified DoD military projects of the recent past by examining Project Stargate is important, we must also not forget that this project was under the same jurisdiction as, provably, the earliest MK Delta tests on soldiers and pilots in the early 1960s, and, supposedly, as the Montauk Project under Camp Hero in New York. Just as MK Delta, later called MK Ultra, was a military project first that had been handed over to the CIA, so too was Project Stargate originally under the DoD, then transferred to CIA. Just as MK Delta dealt with finding the ultimate truth serum, and Stargate, like Operation Dove and MK Ultra itself, operated on the scientific method of applying these drugs to the creation of technology, so too, at the same time as Stargate, was Montauk already applying the technology recovered at Roswell and exchanged with Serpo.